Hey everybody, how's it going? It is I, Lego Zach here. So today I am going to review every movie ever, or at least the ones that I have on my shelf. Um, I get a couple of questions asking, like, you always review movies that you haven't seen. What about the ones that you have seen and you actually have opinions on? Well, today we're gonna sit down. It's gonna be a really long video, so set your phone down, open up a new tab, do whatever you're doing, and listen to this like a podcast. I'm gonna go through each movie, talk about it, and just go through my entire shelf. And I've got lots to go through. This is gonna be also partially like a room tour, so we're just gonna have fun with it. Um, the first is Rob Zombie's 31. Not his best work by any means, but it is still very much in the style of House of a Thousand Corpses, which is, in my opinion, his best work, and we'll get to that one eventually. But it's very fun. It's got Clockwork Orange, Malcolm McDowell in it, and he appears for all of 5 minutes, but he's still overall an enjoyable part of the movie, stylized, of course, like I said, in Rob Zombie fashion, to where it's still enjoyable to watch visually. Now we got a 3-for-1. We have 2001: Space Odyssey, which is fine. It's one of my least favorite Stanley Kubrick movies. Groundbreaking for its time, but just not my personal interest in what I look for like sci-fi fantasy. But Clockwork Orange, on the other hand, I love Clockwork Orange. I think it is, in my opinion, Kubrick's best work. It is an amazing take on dystopian future because it is not like hyper sci-fi. It has some sci-fi elements, but for the most part, it is just like, what if things were a little bit different in the not so distant future? And I think it is beautifully done. Dark, of course, but amazing movie. And then, of course, The Shining, by Stanley Kubrick, written by, I almost said R.L. Stein. But it's good. I think it's dated. It's the kind of movie that you sit down in an art class and analyze scene by scene because of its color choices. And I think that kind of movie is very pretentious. Like Citizen Kane is an incredibly pretentious movie that I don't think that you could fully enjoy unless you are like a film student. And even then, it's like, oh, we're seeing the significance for it and why it's so popular. It's creepy and has its own merits, but it is by no means fantastic in my opinion. So, next we got ABCs of Death, which is a schlocky horror movie made on a very low budget, but it's very interesting because each letter of the alphabet is gone through, but each letter is done by a different director, writer, artist, whatever. Some of them are animated, some of them live action, stop motion, whatever, but it's just a really cool collection of short films, basically. None of them tie together except for the letters of the alphabet. I would recommend checking it out if you're a horror fan, but it's not necessarily a must watch. Across the Universe. Across the Universe is a musical based on Beatles music, not sung by the Beatles, but I think it's amazing. It's one of my favorite musicals, top 3 at least. It runs a little bit long, but it does have an overarching story connecting the music pieces, which the story is kind of forgettable. It's just these set pieces behind the musical that makes it enjoyable. But if you like the Beatles or if you like musicals, definitely give that one a look. And if you haven't noticed, we're going in alphabetical order for the most part. Some of these, like the multi-movie packs, are going to be a little bit difficult, but I'm just going to go down the shelf line and see how it goes. Not really any cuts or any editing or anything. So here's an oddity. It's called Alice. It's a sci-fi original movie from their uh, television network. Really, the only thing of note in it has Tim Curry um, and Kathy Bates. It's a dystopian future, Alice in Wonderland, where everybody's uh, taking emotion drugs to feel emotion. They've evolved past the point of like having emotion, so they kidnap humans and drain them of their emotions so they can take them like drugs. Um, Very cool world that it builds. Obviously based on the Alice in Wonderland, like Disney property and whatnot, but it's a very unique take. Highly recommended if you haven't heard of it. So next is the Alien series, which I apparently don't have, but I do have Covenant, so we're going to review them all as a block. Alien 2 is my favorite one. What's better than one Alien? Hundreds of them, and that's what Alien 2 delivers. Alien 3 is where we start going decline. Alien 4 is obviously the bottom of the barrel. Prometheus comes back up a little bit, and then Covenant, I think, is also really enjoyable. There's some movies later on the shelf that I think take the Alien formula and do it better. Obviously, Alien was made in the 70s. It's a product of its time, but incredibly innovative for its time. But I think some things have taken its exact formula and done it better since then. Next, we got American Horror Story. I've got all the seasons that are worth getting. So that means that I don't have Roanoke or anything past Cult. Apocalypse is okay. But honestly, if we're talking the best of American Horror Story, I don't care for Coven. Asylum is okay. I really like Freak Show. I really like Murder House. I really like Hotel. Those are my three favorites. I think Hotel gets a bit too bogged down in too many storylines going on, but I love its concept and especially its Halloween special. I think it's the best across the entire series. American Psycho, apparently a feminist masterpiece. It was directed by a woman. The book was written by a man, but it's for some reason declared across the internet as a feminist masterpiece, and I think it is not that, but it is still a very fun psychological thriller. Trying to figure out what's real, what's not real within the movie is very good. And obviously, we get Batman playing a sociopathic killer, so there's nothing new there. But I think that one's great. Weird oddity from my childhood. We got Animusic. I remember seeing these in like music class, or if we had a substitute. If you're not familiar with it, it is animated songs done to Rube Goldbergs, which are complicated machines done with strings, ping pong balls, whatever, to complete a simple task, but instead the ping pong balls or whatever are playing the music. And I think that they're just really fun. They're not amazing or anything. I remember many years ago there was a big hoax going around that these were like real contraptions in the world that played this music. No, it's all animated, early animation as well, so it doesn't look great, but just a fun blast from my past that I distinctly remember. Arrival. This is personally my favorite, like, visitors from another world movie, period. Because it is not hostile creatures coming to, the Earth. It is domicile creatures trying to communicate. And of course, our initial response is, blow them up. And then language experts come in and are like, no, they're trying to communicate. And the whole movie is based on discovery of communication and language. And I think it is incredibly well done. Also, just a beautifully done movie. We got Arthur. and then I don't have it, but it's remake as well. Both of the same title. Very fun movies. They're not great. They're just popcorn movies that are very fun. I think that the remake is actually a bit more emotionally impactful. For me personally, I think Kurt Russell is just, or Russell Brand, excuse me. Um, Russell Brand is just, he plays the part of Arthur better than the original. But both fun comedy movies either way. So as we'll see later on, I'm a huge Godzilla fan, clearly. On the top shelf is all my Godzilla figures. But this is actually tied to the Godzilla universe because it involves the character Mandala, which is a like Chinese style serpent dragon. But this is his first appearance, was in Atragon, which is a Japanese movie about a submarine that fights a giant monster. Love giant monster movies. This one is a pretty low quality one, but it is connected to the Godzilla universe, so I had to have it. This is a very bad bootleg, by the way, because it's a very expensive movie to get an authentic copy of. And another expensive movie to get an authentic copy of is Bad Taste. This is Peter Jackson's, his second movie. No, his first movie. This one's his first movie about aliens who take people from Earth to use in their fast food restaurants. It is a sci-fi comedy, some horror elements, mostly a comedy though. I can't really recommend this one compared to his second movie, which we'll get to, but this one is fine. It's fine. Really only significant because Peter Jackson did it. So next we got The Babadook. An incredibly heart-wrenching movie to watch. It is a movie about the manifestation of a broken home, depression, mental illness, suicide. It is a physical manifestation of these horrific attributes in a broken home. It's I really like this movie, but it is not in my top tier of any genre, but it is still a very good quality movie. Baby Driver, which is one of my favorite like action movies. I think its timing with the music and its subsequent tying with that to the action is incredible. Its cast is amazing. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Think of like, I don't even know what to compare it to. I always compare movies to Baby Driver, but maybe a Hot Fuzz or yeah, you know, one of those right movies. Just an incredibly visually and auditorially pleasing movie. Next up is The Banana Splits, which is not great. It takes the Five Nights at Freddy's concept of killer animatronics into a movie, and in my opinion, it's not even the best in that very niche subgenre. It's fun. I think that the child acting is really good in it, surprisingly, but nothing else is great. The animatronics look like just people in costumes, which doesn't make it, it takes away from its scariness, I guess. Battle Royale is fantastic. Have you seen Hunger Games? This is what Hunger Games is based on. Battle Royale is about a, I think, high school group of students who get shipped off to an island and are told, hey, you have to kill each other. And if they try to break the rules, their heads pop. It's the same concept as Hunger Games, but done immensely better, immensely more gory, and the story is told so much better. It doesn't focus as much on the teen drama aspect, and it's more of just the interpersonal connections between these characters because they all do know each other from high school. They're in the same class, and then they're told, hey, you have to kill your classmates. Some of them are boyfriend girlfriends, some of them are have bully relationships. There's interconnected relationships between all the characters. And if you like Cowboy Bebop, Spike is based off of one of the characters in this movie. A little fun fact. Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is an incredible Ray Harryhausen stop-motion giant monster movie. It's obviously dated for its time, but it is really good. I love Harryhausen's work in like Clash of the Titans and things like that, Jason and the Argonauts, but I think this is his best work in my opinion. I love his dinosaur and dragon designs that he does, and this movie really shines. And then on the other side we have Them, which is giant ants. It's okay. It's a very classic sci-fi giant monster movie, but at the end of the day, it is just big ants. So, meh. Next, we have Beetlejuice, which is an incredible movie. I think it really deserves its place in the cultural zeitgeist as being what it is. Using the Harry Belafonte Calypso soundtrack for this movie soundtrack was a great choice. It integrates perfectly to the world it makes. I only wish that we got to explore this world more, either with a longer movie or a sequel. There's always been talks of a second Beetlejuice coming out. But as this movie stands, it is a perfect movie in my opinion. Next is Being John Malkovich. This is the movie that made me fall in love with John Cusack. It is a really interesting concept of John Malkovich, the person that's playing John Malkovich in this movie. And people find a portal into his head to where they can live the life of John Malkovich for a few hours. And then they get spit out on the side of the interstate. But it's just a really interesting movie. I'm not going to say it's mind-blowing or even that great, but it is a really solid movie, and, you know, it's worth a check out. All of the movies we want to talk about are worth looking into, at least, if what I say sounds interesting. I'm not going to say check out every single movie, but if I'm talking about it, it's worth checking out if what I say about it is interesting to you. So next we have Big Trouble Little China, which I recently discovered is a John Carpenter movie. I always associate John Carpenter with The Thing or any other movie. But yeah, John Carpenter and Kurt Russell back at it again with After the Thing, in just a real mash together of every kind of thing that you can imagine. Anything from martial arts to sci-fi to comedy to action to some horror elements, all in one movie that could only be made for this movie. If anybody tried to recreate this, it would go horribly wrong, just because of how niche and interesting it turns out. Not on the top of my list of John Carpenter movies, but still a must-watch. Birds of Prey, or The Wonderful Emancipation of Harley Quinn, is the sequel, basically, to the original Suicide Squad movie. And it really gives Harley Quinn breathing room, a full movie breathing room, to be on display and show how good of a character individually she is. In the first scene, she breaks up with the Joker, and her whole movie is just finding herself and discovering, she doesn't become a good person by any means, but she discovers, oh, I can have a life away from the Joker and be my own character. And then also we get introduced to the Birds of Prey in this movie, and they don't really add anything. I'm not going to say this is a great movie also. None of the DC live action recent movies are, but it's better than the original Suicide Squad, so it gets that credit. Next is Black Panther, which is, in my opinion, the best MCU movie. I love its world building. I love the culture that it has behind it. I think Chadwick Boseman is incredible, and he is obviously going to be missed. But I think this is the most special MCU movie that has ever come out. In my opinion, it even beats Endgame, Infinity War, any of those. I'm excited to see what they do with the second one. We'll see how Shuri does as the new Black Panther, we assume. The one negative is, I didn't notice this until like my fourth time seeing this movie, but when they're fighting in what I'm going to call the train area underground, it is some of the worst CGI in all of the MCU, but doesn't detract from my love for this movie. Oh, and also Killmonger is the best villain in the MCU, maybe seconded to Ultron, but regardless, just all around fantastic movie with great culture. The Blade trilogy. This is a series of movies that I actually hadn't seen until recently. Within the last year, I watched these. I get why people love them so much. The second one is probably my favorite, but I really like the rave scene from the first one. I think that one's just done really well with its lights and sound, adding to the action. But overall, it's a fine trilogy. Wesley Snipes is incredible as Blade, but it is definitely a product of its time, and it shows, which in some cases is good, in some cases is bad. This one, it falls in the middle, but it's still a really good trilogy. So I don't really love anime, but there's a couple that I really like. Bobobo, that's the full name of the show, is an absurdist comedy anime where the characters don't make sense, the things they say don't make sense, their actions are completely random. It almost falls into the Invader Zim style fan base of like, lol, so random, anything can happen, ha ha ha, we're being quirky. But in most shows it's cringy, and this one it's very fun, and I encourage you to check it out. Don't try to watch the whole season, it's honestly a lot. Just watch like 1 or 2 episodes and be like, I get the joke, moving on. Next is Boondock Saints, which is a perfect one and done movie, and then they tried to do it again and totally ruined it with the second one, All Saints Day. But this one is a fantastic gangster mystery action movie. Norman Reedus' best role. Don't care for him in The Walking Dead terribly much, but this is a really solid movie with really great action, almost a precursor to John Wick in that style. And here is the second Peter Jackson movie, his second film, Brain Dead, also called Dead Alive, but I think that was the European title for it. But this is a fantastic gore-fest movie. More of a gory comedy, and I'm not using the word horror because it is not scary, but it is definitely gross and bloody and in your face. But it takes its comedy before anything else. But I think this is Peter Jackson's best work, even better than King Kong from 2005, just because of how absurdly gory this movie is, but it's so much fun, and I highly recommend checking it out. This is a Korean bootleg of this because it is incredibly expensive, even on DVD or Blu-ray. But I would recommend seeking this one out just to give it a try. Just wild ride through and through. You'll never be bored. Next is Brazil. Another dystopian sci-fi movie, but fully bureaucratic. Take the bad guys from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and make a whole movie about it, but it's not aliens, it's the way Earth is. Everything is bureaucratic, everything is terrible, but it is a really pretty movie with a great story. Bride of Frankenstein, which probably I should talk about after Frankenstein, but spoilers, I like this one better than the original Frankenstein. This is from the 30s or 40s Universal collection. And you're going to see these several times. I have them in different iterations of DVD, but I think that this is the third best Universal movie. We'll get to my top two, but this one is better than Frankenstein. I think the pathos, the desires behind the characters, and the acting and visual effects is just stronger than the original. Still love the original, just prefer this one. Next is Cabin in the Woods, which is my favorite horror movie of all time. It is everything from every horror movie shoved into one movie. It is essentially the origin story of how all horror movies could possibly take place. And I think it's done fantastically. Highly recommend it if you've never seen it. Go into it as blind as you can, but my goodness, it is a fantastic horror film. Like I said, my number one favorite. Next is Chappie. I've got several steelbooks, but so this one doesn't have the title on the front, but it's Chappie, which is a New Zealand film featuring the musical art of Die Antwoord, and it's got Hugh Jackman in it as the bad guy. I'm a huge fan of Die Antwoord, and that's actually what made me watch this movie, not the other way around like a lot of people. This whole studio, I forget the name of the studio, but the studio that makes this and a couple of other movies that we'll talk about, just is a fantastic studio. The main actor in several other movies is just wonderful. Highly, highly recommend you check out Chappie, and subsequently Die Antwoord, if it's your style of music. It's not for everybody, but I personally really enjoy them. Next is our first big box set is Charmed. This is my favorite TV show. I've liked it ever since it first came out, whenever I was a very small child, but I think it is so imaginative and fun. It's not really the dark side of like witchcraft or anything. It's more of just like, let's take witchcrafty elements and make them into this really special world. Its sister show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, is obviously more popular and the zeitgeist better, but I prefer Charmed. I've just always had a soft spot for it, and Alyssa Milano is my number one crush of all time. Love you, girl. Haven't gotten the chance to open this one, it's still a sealed box, but definitely will be watching this one soon. So this is an oddity. So it's called Circus of the Dead. It's a low-budget horror movie with a very limited release. I actually found this one at a pawn shop, and what drew me to it is this initial copy is signed by all of the actors. And it's got a lot of goodies on the inside, which I'm not going to open up. But it's scary clown movie. Evil clown gang goes around killing people indiscriminately. It's not fantastic. It's just really interesting. If you are looking for a good scary clown movie and don't want to resort to the, ones that everybody is always talking about, look into this one. I'm not sure where you could get it or watch it on streaming, but it's still very interesting. Clash of the Titans. Like I said, another Ray Harryhausen movie. Some great work. The Kraken, the Medusa, the skeletons, just all of his work in this movie makes it amazing. And the story is just we've heard it 100 times, either in literature or movies, but it's, the hero's journey. Almost a Hercules type character, but it's Jason and the Argonauts. And its sequel being Jason and the Argonauts. Now, I don't care for the remake that came out early 2000s. What makes this movie and its sequel special are the special effects done by Ray Harryhausen. Next is The Collector and The Collection, which are really good horror movies. In the same vein as like Saw, but not terrible. I don't care for Saw. It does have the like gross out, world that Saw builds on, of being a little squeamish and stuff. But these movies have an excellent story, an excellent atmosphere. The villain is so much more interesting, in my opinion, than Jigsaw is in Saw. And a really good set of movies to check out, especially the sequel. You don't really need to watch the first one to watch the second one, but it does help, obviously. But the second one is a fantastic movie. And all I'm going to say is the nightclub scene. Just, so good. Here's a newer one, The Color Out of Space. Nicolas Cage has been on this kick of doing indie horror movies. This one's actually based on an H.P. Lovecraft short story. This movie's not great, but its visuals are really cool. Its storytelling method is pretty cool. The story is convoluted, and I honestly had to watch a YouTube video explaining this movie after I watched it immediately. But once you get a grasp on the story, it is a very enjoyable movie. I'm not going to say excellent, but it's good. And it's one of the very few good H.P. Lovecraft adaptations. Next is my favorite Universal classic monster movie, Creature of the Black Lagoon. I love a good monster movie, and I think that this one just does it the best. Obviously, it was made, I think, 30 years later than the true classic original Universal horror movies, but the Gill Man is the best Universal monster, in my opinion. I think, he's the most interesting. We know the least about him, and for whatever reason, I've just always been attached to this movie in comparison to the other ones. Critters. I think I've only seen the first one and the fourth one, and they're not good. Annoying little space creatures that kill people. It's kind of like Gremlins, but just not as good or fun. The first one has Jennifer Aniston in it in her first movie role, but it's not great otherwise. So, A Cure for Wellness is great though. I saw this movie when it very first came out. the plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's very esoteric and weird, and the whole time you're watching, you're like, "What's going on? What's going on?" But that's the story kind of takes a sideline. It's more of just the feeling this movie gives you. It's not a scary movie, but it is very haunting. You feel emotions. You feel what these characters are feeling, even if you don't fully understand what's going on. The whole movie, you're just like, oh, whoa, that's so weird. Weird feelings I'm feeling. They're feeling stuff. Stuff's happening. It's worth checking out. Then we got The Dark Knight, which is the best one in the trilogy. Um, Obviously, Heath Ledger's last performance, but it to this day remains the best Batman movie, in my opinion. Um, I think it's tied to realism, but also his portrayal of the Joker, and just uh, for lack of a better term, its realism just really drew me in, as that's what Batman is. Batman is not this flying around superhero who can do anything. He is a person who solves his problems through technology or science or just outsmarting it. And I think this movie nails that Batman, my view of Batman. So this one is Death to Smoochy, which is a little known Robin Williams and Edward Norton movie where Edward Norton plays basically the equivalent of Barney, and Robin Williams tries to kill him because he's jealous because he took his job. A dark comedy, highly recommend it if you're a Robin Williams fan. It is one of his adult movies. It is not a Flubber or Aladdin. You know, don't show this one to the kids, but it is it's really good, and it's not one that a lot of people talk about. The Devil's Rejects, which is Rob Zombie's second movie in the House of a Thousand Corpses trilogy. This one's fine. I really don't have an opinion on the second one. The third one's trash. I don't like the third one. The second one just exists, but the first one we'll talk about, but I love that one. So District 9 is also by the same people who did Chappie. It's another New Zealand movie. It's another alien invasion movie, but I like my alien invasion movies with a twist, as you can tell. But this one is the aliens come to Earth, and then they're like, hey, we're refugees, actually. You know, help us. So the aliens get put in the projects equivalent in the middle of New Zealand. And like, they live off of welfare, and they form gangs with humans, and it's really interesting. I recommend checking it out if you're into the alien invasion genre, but you're kind of tired of the same old, same old. It's a really fresh take. Next is Django Unchained, which is a masterpiece done by Quentin Tarantino. Absolutely love Quentin Tarantino. Not my favorite of his, but a still really good movie. I think Jamie Foxx's best work that he's done. Like all Tarantino movies, runs a bit long, but you are constantly interested the entire time the movie is happening. Next is Dogma by Kevin Smith. Interesting take on religion. I'm not gonna say it's like, oh, it's such a smart movie the way it talks about religion. No, it's poop jokes and fart jokes. But I think it is an interesting take on religion. By no means does it reflect my religious views, but it is still like, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it, I guess. But it is the best out of Kevin Smith's Clerks verse, I'll say. Clerks 1 is still great. Clerks 2 is trash. Mallrats is really good. Dogma is great. Or I guess the Museverse is what it's called, the Jay and Silent Bob movies. But that one's my favorite, and then followed by Clerks. Alright. So this is a box set of all of the Dolomite movies. If you're not familiar with Dolomite, it's created by a guy named Rudy Ray Moore, who, if you're familiar with Tommy Wiseau, basically the same thing. A guy was like, I want to make movies, I want to star in them, I'm going to write them, I just want to make movies. So he started off with a character called Dolomite, which is a lady-loving gangster, cool guy, martial arts, and that's what all of his movies basically are. In one of his movies, he fights the devil, but they're all schlocky, blaxploitation type movies. My favorite one is The Human Tornado. Highly recommend watching Dolomite and Human Tornado. Maybe not all of them, because they're all basically the same. And if you're interested in the one where he fights the devil, it's called Petey Wheatstraw. Fine. Donnie Darko was my first introduction to Jake Gyllenhaal, and also my introduction to the sci-fi time travel-esque genre. I think that this movie came into my life at a very important age, a very molding age, where I fell in love with this genre and style of movie. The movies that don't really make sense, but you have a great time watching. I've heard all the arguments of why this movie makes perfect sense and why it makes no sense. I don't care. It's fun to watch. It's enjoyable throughout. But, maybe if you're trying to write a time travel story, make it make a little bit more sense than this one. But I still love it. So next is the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. This is my second favorite Dracula. I prefer Christopher Lee's Hammer Dracula, but I think this one's serviceable. It is not my least favorite Universal monster movie. I don't even own that one. It's The Wolfman. I do not like The Wolfman. Actually, this isn't even my third least favorite, because The Mummy. I also think The Mummy is trash. But it's not great, but it is significant because it is the first vampire movie as we know them. And it obviously formed the mythos of Dracula based on Bram Stoker's book. Next is Eddie Izzard's Dressed to Kill. It's one of my favorite stand-up comedy specials. I just think Eddie Izzard is hysterical. And if you like him, he was also in Across the Universe as Mr. Kite. Just a little throwback to 40 minutes ago. But yeah, it's just a good comedy special. Not groundbreaking in any way, but always gets a laugh out of me. Next is Edward Scissorhands. Obviously a Tim Burton classic. I think the picturesque village that it takes place in is just peak Tim Burton. When everybody thinks of his style, they think of this movie for a reason. Johnny Depp is obviously incredible in it, and Winona Ryder, also incredible. Also great in Beetlejuice, though. But everybody, you know why this movie's good. Encino Man, my personal favorite Pauly Shore movie, and probably also Brendan Fraser movie. I love Pauly Shore for some awful reason. He plays the same exact character in every movie he's ever been in. But I just love he's just like California surfer boy thing that he's got going on. I think he does it really well. Don't change what's not broken. But it's just a fun comedy. Stupid as heck, but really fun. Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind. I don't love this movie, actually, the more I think about it. I've seen it a few times. I think it's one of Jim Carrey's weaker things. He's still really good in it. But if you want a good Jim Carrey drama, watch Man on the Moon. And I don't have much to say about it. Now, The Evil Dead 1 and 2. Don't even bother watching the first one. If you haven't seen it, just watch the second one, because the first 15 minutes of the second one is the first movie remade, condensed, and done better. Because if you don't know the story behind it, the first one was made with no budget. The second one was like, hey, we have a budget now. We're also under a new studio. We can't use the film rights from the original, so let's just redo it better and then build off that story. The second one is a classic horror movie. And Bruce Campbell is a fantastic actor as well. But yeah, like I said, if you haven't seen the first one, just watch the second one, it's weird to convince people. It's true. You don't need to see the first one to get the second one. Fantastic Mr. Fox. This is the movie that really introduced me to Wes Anderson. I watched this one before I watched any of his others, and then went back and watched them, and now I love them. It is really good stop animation. It is not quite to like Studio Laika, who did Kubo and the Two Strings and Box Trolls. It's not up to that par, but it is still a very good stylized stop animation, obviously with incredible voice acting and story. But this was just my personal introduction to Wes Anderson. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, what has inspired 4 or 5 years of my Halloween costumes. I've dressed as Johnny Depp in this movie. It's one of those movies that you really like in college. It has no real weight. It is just one of those like, whoa, this is crazy. He's doing so many drugs and weird stuff's happening. Like, it's a really good college movie. And I can see why so many college students have this exact poster in their dorm. And I'm not saying it doesn't hold up today, it's just not on the same pedestal that it was while I was in college. The Fifth Element, which is a fantastic and, in my opinion, often overlooked sci-fi high fantasy. Spoiler alert, I don't really like Star Wars. This movie and a movie that we'll get to called Valerian are, in my opinion, the better replacement for Star Wars. Everything that you want out of Star Wars, you can get out of those two movies, and it'd be better. I think this is Bruce Willis's best movie. Die Hard is okay. I just love this movie. Highly recommend it if you are a Star Wars fan. Because for whatever reason, a lot of people don't talk about it and haven't seen this one. So please give it a check out. So we're not going to talk about this one. Haha. It's real good. Big old spoiler at the end. Go watch it. It's just real good. So this one needs a little explaining. Back in the day when Netflix first introduced their streaming service, they had a subcategory called gay movies. And I was like, what qualifies as a gay movie? And I watched this one on Netflix. It's called First Period. And the only thing gay about it is the two main characters are dressed as ladies and proceed through the whole movie as ladies, like teenage girls, even though they're guys in their 30s. But it's never addressed in the movie. This isn't like a trans movie or anything. It is just two guys playing the role of girls, teenage girls going through their first period into high school. It's very funny, very raunchy. I don't know, watch it with some friends. It's a good laugh, good to have some drinks with. Um, and not a political movie. So Four Rooms, the last Tarantino movie that I ever watched. It was the last one that I had to watch to have say that I've seen them all. And technically, only a fourth of it is a Tarantino movie because, like the title says, it is four different rooms. Each room is directed by a different director, kind of like ABCs of Death, but they get more breath to tell a story. And the bellhop goes from each room and encounter something wacky. Oh, what situation have I got myself into? Will this shift ever end? Wah, wah. Really good movie. Some action, mostly comedy. I recommend it if you like comedy or Tarantino or any of the other directors who are featured in this movie. Here we are, the original Frankenstein, the predecessor to Bride of Frankenstein. This movie is an absolute classic for a reason. And I think it deserves all the respect that it gets. It is just, in my opinion, just a step below Bride, but doesn't mean that this one's not great. This one's fantastic. Boris Karloff does Frankenstein's monster so well. It's so good. Yes, it's black and white. A lot of the Universal monster movies are, and that's a hard barrier for some people to get over, but this is the best movie to get into black and white movies, in my opinion. So, Freddy Got Fingered is a Tom Green movie made in the early 2000s and is a product of that. If you like gross, absurd, raunchy humor that's gonna make any grown man blush, this is your movie. I remember one of the first times I hung out with my friend Daniel Elmore. He was like, "Have you ever seen this movie?" "No." "We're gonna watch it." We watched the whole thing, and to this day, it is a movie that I quote almost daily. It is not a great movie. It's not a good movie. One might say it's one of the worst movies, but by golly, is it enjoyable. Not because it's one of those like so bad it's good, but just because your jaw is on the floor the entire time you're watching this movie with how wild it is. So next I've got all of the Friday the 13th movies, but I'm only going to hold this one. I don't love Friday the 13th as much as I love Nightmare on Elm Street. Friday the 13th doesn't get good until the fourth movie, in my opinion, when they introduce Tommy Jarvis. And then as it gets more campy, it gets more interesting to me. But it's just not one of my favorite franchises. 1 and 2 I don't like almost at all. 3 starts to get good. 4 is its best, in my opinion. 5 is good. 6, I think, has the psychic girl. That one's weird, so it goes down for me. And then 7 and 8 are pretty good. It's a temple or a tent pole of the horror franchise for a reason. But in my opinion, it is just overshadowed by Nightmare on Elm Street. So next is Gamera. These are, I think, the first 2 Gamera movies. I've only ever seen the very first Gamera movie. I have several of them on my shelf. I prefer Godzilla way more than Gamera. I don't even think Gamera is that interesting. but they're so closely related, and some people even think they're in the same universe. They're not. Um, but it is a distinct and interesting take on the giant monster thing, especially post Godzilla, because this movie definitely came out after Godzilla and is inspired incredibly heavily by it. But as the franchises go on, they go in different directions. Godzilla is much more of a, I'm going to sometimes attack the city, sometimes save the city. Gamera is called the friend of the children, because he always saves the kids. He is always the good guy going after the bad monster, except in the first movie, but they were still figuring out at that point. So I can't really talk too much about my enjoyment of these movies specifically, except for the first one, but an interesting character. So I've got just a lot of Godzilla movies back here, and I'll talk about some of them briefly. We'll get more into them once we get further down the shelf. But I love Godzilla. Godzilla is my favorite franchise, period. Beats out Marvel, it beats out DC. Godzilla is my jam. And y'all see what I'm talking about whenever we get to my little secret shelf over here, just beyond the camera's view. But it's, gosh, I just love when two giant monsters punch each other and smack against each other. Sometimes you throw in a giant robot. The one thing that brings down every single Godzilla movie that's ever been made is the over half the movie being dedicated to the human problems, or the humans trying to solve the Godzilla problem. It weighs down every Godzilla movie. It's in all of them, but it's just kind of an expected part at this point. But I love this franchise so much. And we'll talk more specifically about these three. This one's bad. This is the one that America was introduced to Godzilla with Matthew Broderick. It's bad. They don't even call the monster in this one Godzilla in the Godzilla fan base. This is called Zilla because there is no god in this lizard. It's very skippable. This is the animated series based on the 1980s or 1990s Americanized Godzilla. It's interesting. It's a monster of the week. Godzilla goes around, but he's fully a good guy, saving the day from giant monsters. Enjoyable. I haven't watched all of it. I've probably seen half of the episodes. It's fine. I don't like the animation at all. It's ugly, but the story is fine. Shin Godzilla, which is the Japanese reboot from the mid-2010s, and is the best modern Godzilla in my opinion. It is a true retelling and origin of Godzilla, but does it so incredibly well. I highly recommend this movie if you haven't seen it. Like I said, it's a Japanese, movie, so it's going to be subtitled. But it really takes its time and lets the character of Godzilla breathe and quite literally evolve. I look into this one if you're not super familiar with the Godzilla franchise and you've only seen the American ones. This is a good place to start. Speaking of the American ones, I got all three of them here. This one's not good. Just Godzilla is not good. I think they say he's on screen for less than 10 minutes in the whole movie. That's no fun. This one is the best out of the trilogy. I love its inclusion of Mothra, Rodan, all these new monsters that they include, like the mammoth and things. Really like this one. And then Godzilla vs. Kong is junk food for your brain. There's no sustenance. But as a Godzilla fan, I enjoyed it, but definitely not as much as King of the Monsters. Next, Goodfellas, probably the most famous and popular gangster mobster movie. Um, and I agree. I don't love Godfather at all, any of them. The second one is the best out of the Godfather trilogy, but I still don't love it. This one is wonderful and fantastic. It's um, on the same like tiers like Donnie Brasco, in my opinion, or something like that. Um, but you know, if you're into this type of movie, you've seen this one. Now, I absolutely hate this 3-pack. It doesn't make sense to me, but it is so difficult to find just Gremlins and Gremlins 2 on its own Blu-ray. I don't like the Goonies terribly much. It's one of those, like, I really liked it as a kid. It's very like, oh wow, kid, high adventure, exciting. But as an adult, I don't love it. But Gremlins 1 and 2, specifically Gremlins 2, I love. I think the invention of all of the weird gremlins from Gremlins 2 is just a super good addition to the franchise. The first one obviously innovates the entire concept, but the second one I think is just so much fun. Grand Budapest Hotel is Wes Anderson's second or third best movie, in my opinion. It's not, definitely not the best, but still a very enjoyable movie. I wouldn't start with this one. We'll get to the one later that I would recommend you start with, but this is a good Wes Anderson movie. Then the last one before I reset the camera is The Greatest Showman, featuring Hugh Jackman. It's another musical based on the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. I don't love it as much as a lot of people love it. I think it is still a really good musical. It's really fun. There's like 3 songs that go real hard in this movie, but I don't know. I'm not super into the like, oh, believe in yourself and love yourself message that this movie goes for. Like, it's a great message, but it goes way too hard in on like, I'm perfect just the way I am. Like, we get it. You don't have to sing 5 songs about it throughout the entire movie. So, you know, are the 2 Grindhouse Tarantino movies. Death Proof is not good, and Planet Terror is very fun, really gross, but it's, if you have to watch just one, watch Planet Terror. Death Proof, I don't like at all. But as a Tarantino fan, it's required watching. Guns Akimbo. So a lot of people have seen stills from this movie of Daniel Radcliffe holding guns with a pair of slippers on his feet and a bathrobe, but I have no idea that it's from this movie. Really good movie. Guns Akimbo. Akimbo means 4 hands, so it's guns for hands. He's thrown into an online death game where he's randomly matched up with somebody and has to kill or be killed. But it's a really good movie just because it's Daniel Radcliffe. I recommend checking it out. It's one of those like low budget quirky movies, but a lot of fun. Now I'm going to get some flack for this one, but the only Halloween movie from the Halloween Michael Myers franchise that I like is the one without Michael Myers, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. In my opinion, is the second best like Halloween time, the like Halloween day holiday movie. The first is Trick or Treat, but this is such a good just Halloween holiday movie. I don't care for Michael Myers as a character or a tent pole of the horror franchise. This movie is really fun though. If you've only ever seen the first or second or the new Michael Myers movies, give this one a watch. It has nothing to do with Michael Myers, but it's still real fun. So this one's in a weird place in order just because alphabetically, but Hannibal Rising is a origin story for Hannibal from Silence of the Lambs. Um, it's fine. I only have it because I have the whole franchise. This one is the one of the weakest, if not the weakest, in the whole franchise. Um, you know, if you want to know why Hannibal eats people or why he's such a bad dude, give it a watch. It's Nazis. That's the answer. I saved you a bad movie watch. So, Hardcore Henry is one of the hardest movies to watch that I've ever seen. And not for the reason you're thinking. So, this whole movie is done in first person. Like, the camera is strapped to somebody's forehead as the movie goes along. But it's also an action movie, so there's lots of sliding and flipping and jumping off of buildings and stuff. And it makes you so nauseous watching it. But it's fantastic. It's just not for the easily upset stomach. It's done by the same people who did District 9 and Chappie, another New Zealand production. You'll see a lot of similar faces in this movie that you did in District 9. But it's really good if you can get past the first person camera perspective. Also, the story is pretty fun in it as well. So this is one that I can't really recommend that you watch unless you are just a die-hard Harlan Ellison fan. This is just a interview compilation with Harlan Ellison based on all of his work. He is a prolific sci-fi author. He's done just a lot of really famous sci-fi novels, TV shows, and stuff like that. But this is literally just an interview of him being angry for 2 hours. You know, watch it if you are a super fan, but otherwise I don't think that you would get anything out of it. The Hateful Eight. We are getting on up there in Tarantino's best. I think this is probably his third best, is what I would say. This movie is too long, though. All of his movies feel a little long. This one is too long. Like, again, you're never bored, but I think this movie is close to 3 hours long, and it does not need to be that. Just cut it down 30 minutes or something. Like, at every moment in the movie, you are engaged and enjoying it, but you are sitting down for this movie for the long haul. But highly recommended either way. Just dedicate some time. Next is Hellboy. I only have this one because I found the Steelbook for cheap. But this is the best Hellboy movie, the second one. So there was Hellboy, this one, and then the recent one that came out with the guy from Stranger Things. This one is the best one, has the best story, has the best villains. I really recommend all three of them. All three of them are great, but this is just my personal favorite Hellboy. He's one of my favorite superheroes. He's probably in my top 5 favorite superheroes. So I'd give him a check out. From a very young age, I've always been a Beatles fan, and I really like their film adaptations that they've done. Help is, it almost feels like the guys were just sitting around, they made their album, and they're like, you know what, these songs kind of work together, let's make a movie about it. And they spent a day, banged out a real loose story to tie all these songs together, and made a movie. It's not a high concept or anything. In fact, this one's a little racist, but it's whatever, it's fine, it's still fun. Not their best movie by any means, but still a really enjoyable one. Here is, in my opinion, the best Disney animated movie, Hercules. I love this movie, not necessarily for its songs or anything like that. I just love the world it builds. I love the Titan fight at the end, the Hydra fight, because again, giant monsters. Whoa, starting to see a theme. But yeah, this is just my favorite animated Disney movie, if not my favorite Disney movie. Hereditary, not as good as its younger sister, which we'll talk about. Um, Honestly, I can't even recommend this movie. This movie just makes you feel gross and sad. Um, Very good movie, very well done movie, but you don't feel like good watching it. It's like, you know, well, you just watch it, you feel sad, then it ends, and you're like, oh, there's nobody gets a happy ending in this one. Um, but A24 has become one of my favorite filmmakers, um, and this one is a must watch if you are a fan of horror and drama, um, family issue dynamic movies, but with a little spooky element. So if there's one thing I hate, it's art house movies. Movies that are made specifically just for people to sit around chairs and drink their wine and analyze and act all high and mighty about. I hate those type of movies. Except for this one, Holy Motors. I believe it's French, but I could be wrong. It's a different speaking movie other than English. I think it's European of some kind. So Spanish, French, one of those. But while this movie is really interesting, it is a movie about movie making. It is a really hard movie to describe also now that I'm, trying to talk about it for 45 seconds. So the guy in this movie is going from job to job. He has many jobs throughout the day, like on a schedule, but each job is an acting part. And he is acting essentially for no camera. He is doing stage performance, street performance with no audience. It's too weird to try to explain. Honestly, just go into it with an open mind, watch it. It is in a different language. It is very artsy, but it's so good. Highly recommend Holy Motors. And here is the best Rob Zombie movie, House of a Thousand Corpses. It is what cemented and established his style of filmmaking, which is jump cuts, very stylized, very cluttered shots. If you ever watch the show Hoarders, his style is almost that of Hoarders. Every room is just full of really creepy things, but done in an artsy way, but it's full and gross. But this is probably his best movie and definitely the best in the trilogy. So House on Haunted Hill, the remake. The only reason this movie gets a spot on my shelf is because it was the first horror movie I ever saw. I was very young. I was 5, younger maybe, and it scared me to death. Upon rewatching it, it's fine. There's really nothing special about it. Spooky house, spooky going ons. But no, it just has a very special place in my heart for being the first horror movie I ever saw. It's worth checking out. The original is probably still better, but I can't see past nostalgia for it. So this one is the one that's special to me. So we're starting to get into some Miyazaki stuff with Studio Ghibli. This is Howl's Moving Castle. It is my second favorite Ghibli movie. I love these more than I love Disney movies, probably. I haven't seen all of them yet. I'm still working my way through them. I've seen over half, but this one and Spirited Away are my favorites. If you are not familiar with Studio Ghibli, it is the Japanese equivalent of Disney. Beautiful quality animation, voice acting, storytelling, and they also have really good dubs. So if you don't want to read subtitles under anything, they have high-profile English-speaking actors dubbing over the lines. This one even has Christian Bale in it as the titular Howl. My Neighbor Totoro has like the Fanning sisters. Each one has somebody high profile, but highly recommend these if you haven't seen them. Any of the Ghibli movies, except for Grave of Fireflies. Grave of Fireflies is just sad. It's not good. It just makes you sad, and it's not worth watching. So this one, we're not going to talk about Jack Frost because it's not good. It's a snowman that rapes people. It's no fun for anybody. But Ice Cream Man is so much fun. It is a cheap horror movie where an ice cream man kills people. But it's a lot of fun to watch. It's really kooky, and it uses the ice cream motif really well. He turns a guy's head into an ice cream cone at one point. But I would seek it out if you're into like cheaper horror movies or like serial killer slashers. Very interesting one that isn't talked about a whole lot. Inglourious Basterds, which is another Tarantino movie. This one's all about hunting and killing Nazis, and at the end, thousands of Nazis explode in a fire. It's just good fun. That Tarantino, high gore, high graphic, very stylized movie that you come to expect, but with Nazis. Must watch. So, Into the Wild is based on a book by the same title. And this movie is about a guy who drops everything, gets in a van, and leaves. And, lives in the woods and becomes, a hippie, but a homeless hippie that isn't homeless because of the choices that directly impacted his life, but like an intentional journey of self-discovery. This is the kind of movie that you watch when you're in college and your friends have to pull you back to reality and be like, no, you cannot quit your job and sell everything you own to do this. Because that's what happened to me, and I've heard it has happened to several other people. It's a very good movie about finding yourself, your own spiritual journey, whatever that might be. I highly recommend it, especially if you're younger, because it will touch you in that certain way that I don't think it'll touch you as an adult. The Invisible Man. This is my second favorite Universal monster movie, or my favorite from the original 30s crop of Universal monsters. I love the insanity of the character of the Invisible Man. I love that he's kind of just a rude guy. He's a criminal, just is stealing stuff and hurting people just because he's insane and having fun. It's more of a wacky sci-fi than anything, than a monster movie. But I love this movie. Just barely squeaks out that I like Creature from the Black Lagoon better. But definitely out of the original 30s Universal monster movies, this is my favorite. So I went on a martial arts movie kick recently, and this is at the top of a lot of people's list, is Ip Man. It's not IP Man. I made that mistake. It's Ip Man. So this is the story of Jet Li's mentor, basically. It's apparently based on a true story, but this is the guy who taught Jet Li. Very good. Not my favorite martial arts movie, though. I like my martial arts movies with a little bit of mysticism or camp or whatever. Like Enter the Dragon, I think, is probably my favorite one. I just don't have it. But this one is still really good, but it is just straight martial arts. No camp, no real fun to be had. It is a very serious martial arts movie. Next is Isle of Dogs, another animated Wes Anderson movie. In my opinion, it is not as enjoyable as Fantastic Mr. Fox, but still tells a very compelling story between a boy and his dog, is what it boils down to. If you've only seen Fantastic Mr. Fox and haven't seen this one, watch it. You're gonna cry. If you cry in Disney movies, you'll cry in this one, but it's real good and real pretty. So I Spit on Your Grave is one of those. It's another one of those movies that's a little hard to watch because it's a rape revenge movie. You know, bad things happen to this woman, and then she goes one by one killing her attackers. I can't say I love it. I can't say I watch it, but it is one of those like necessary horror classics. So you know, if you want to feel something, give it a try. So this is getting into my true love of really terrible movies that are so bad they're good. I think this is the first one that we've really come across that's truly just an awful movie, but that's what makes it enjoyable. This one leans into it a bit more. It knows that it's a bad movie and kind of camps it up a little bit, but it came from somewhere else. Is a, I think it's 80s, 90s, maybe even early 2000s sci-fi movie based on like 50s sci-fi. So all the flying saucers are on a string, or if a guy's arm gets cut off, it's just an absurd amount of blood, more blood than would be in somebody's body. It really leans into it in its dialogue, it's the way it's shot, it's the actors even. But this one also makes you feel like anybody can make a movie, and it kind of inspired me to like make something similar. I don't think I ever will, but I don't know. It's a really good homemade movie. Here's a 3-pack of the Jason movies. Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, and Freddy vs. Jason. Jason Goes to Hell is fine. I don't love it. It throws a weird wrench into the whole Jason mythos. Jason X, I love. It is. I take it back that 4 is my favorite. X is my favorite because it is. It knows it's stupid. It's Jason in space. It's future Jason with like nanobite technology on a spaceship, and that is my favorite Jason. And then Freddy vs. Jason is okay, but I think it was not the battle that everybody expected it to be. I think it was made just because people were asking for it, not because they necessarily had a good idea for it. So out of these 3, just Jason X is by far the most enjoyable to watch. Next is John Wick. I've only seen the first one, have not seen the second or third one, but it's rare whenever in your lifetime you see a movie that will later define an entire subgenre of movies. And now this is the type of movie that everybody compares other movies to. They say, oh, it's a lot like John Wick because of its action, because of the way it's shot, whatever. This is a revolutionary action movie. Absolutely love this movie. Still need to watch the second and third one because I like the world that it builds with the whole hotel aspect and like underground currency and stuff. But this movie gets as much praise as it does for a good reason. Jojo Rabbit, which is a child Nazi movie. It is Hitler Youth in a movie. But Hitler is played by Taika Waititi, and it's fantastic. It is hilarious. It's dark at some parts, like, you know, oh child, go take this bomb and go give that man a hug over there. Like, very dark in its comedy, but an absolutely fantastic take on Nazis, of just like the absurdity of what they believe wrapped into a movie. It's even got the girl from uh, the girl from Pitch Perfect, the lady that played Fat Amy. She's in this. Taika Waititi's in this. Just real good. Please go watch this. It was a more recent one, but I think a lot of people missed it. Give it a check out. Next is Joker. This movie was really good. I was really scared about this movie, that it was going to be too much, but I think it did a really good job of hitting the mental illness aspect, the poverty aspect, just everything about the Joker. It really came together. And I've seen a lot of people say that this isn't the Joker that we know, but that's okay, because it's almost a refreshing new take on a character that we haven't seen. Honestly, whenever it tries to tie itself to the Batman mythos is when it's at its weakest. Whenever we see the Waynes or any of those characters like that, this movie is at its best when it is telling a unique story, and it tells that story so well. The two new Jumanji movies. They're both really good, shockingly. Welcome to the Jungle is a really fun, like, hey, here's a kind of a Freaky Friday type situation, but it's also a really good take on Jumanji, because it's a video game now instead of a board game. But then the next level is the second one that came out, the third one. But that one, in my opinion, is better because it takes the concepts that it established in the first one, it builds upon them, and then changes them around. So I would highly recommend that you check out both of them if you liked the first one. Even if you didn't, they stand alone pretty well. Next is Kill Bill Part 1 and 2. I don't love the second one. The first one is fantastic. Highly recommend these. Clearly, if you're a Tarantino fan, I'm sure you've seen them. The first one has all of the parts that people remember, and they think that that carries over to the second one, but the second one doesn't have nearly as much. It focuses a lot more between Bill and the bride's dynamic, but the first one has all of the memorable parts that you think of when you think of Kill Bill. So I often find myself just watching the first one, never really returning to the second one. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It started as a really kind of underground 70s, 80s sci-fi horror movie, but now has become much more famous and popular, but rightfully so. Fantastic, wacky sci-fi horror movie. If you've heard of it or seen images of it, look it up. It's really cool. The original King Kong. This is probably in my top 5 favorite movies, period. Yes, it is incredibly dated. 1933. We are talking about before the original Dracula or Frankenstein. But it's the stop animation I love. It is giant monster movie that I love. And it clips along at a breakneck pace. Unlike the Peter Jackson 2005 one, this movie goes so fast and it's so well done the entire time. There's so much love and craftsmanship put into this movie. Highly recommend watching it if you haven't seen the original one from 1933. But springboarding off of that, we get King Kong Escapes. So backstory. King Kong, huge hit in America. Godzilla comes out in the 60s in Japan. We get Godzilla versus King Kong in in Godzilla's third appearance. There's Godzilla Strikes Back, or Strikes Again, and then Godzilla versus King Kong. That one was a huge success internationally, so then Japan was like, oh, we want King Kong back again. And it's terrible. He fights a robot King Kong. It's not great. Honestly, unless you're just a big fan of the Godzilla franchise, this is an entirely skippable movie. And then we got the absolute bloated 2005 King Kong that I had just talked about. It is Peter Jackson's magnum opus. It really shows that he cares about making movies. It is just far too long. Oh my goodness, this movie breaches 3 hours. It tries to be a Lord of the Rings. And I don't love this movie because of it. It's beautiful, beautiful movie. I do not love this movie because of that, though. Then we get the much more interesting Kong Skull Island, with Samuel L. Jackson and Loki and them from just a few years ago. This one's much more interesting. It is the same retelling of King Kong that we've gotten many times, but it introduces new, like, evil characters, and this whole new, we really explore Skull Island a lot more than we have in the previous movies. So I like this one so much better than the Peter Jackson. Again, the Peter Jackson one is beautiful, more pretty than this one, but it is just too long. So next we got Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Val Kilmer and Robert Downey Jr., aka Iron Man. It is an action comedy drama movie. Very good. A little bit hard to describe. Almost a buddy cop style movie, but they're not cops. I don't know. Give it a watch if you haven't seen it, but hard to explain just off the top of my head. Labyrinth is a movie that I watched a ton as a child. Made me fall in love with David Bowie and his music, and also Jim Henson. Have a huge love for the Muppets and Sesame Street and things, and it all came from The Labyrinth. I don't like the Dark Crystal though. That one's it's gross to me. I don't like the character design of that one. But this one makes them much more Sesame Street adjacent, to where they're much more accessible. So Lars and the Real Girl. When you describe this movie to somebody, they instantly cringe. They're not into it. So you got Ryan Gosling here, and he falls in love with a sex doll, but it's not a sex thing. He's like in love with her and personifies her as a person, and everybody's like, yo, that's weird. And he's like, no, I love her. And then everybody starts warming up to it, and it's like, oh, maybe it isn't a sex thing, so maybe it's cool. So hard to describe, and people be on board with it, but trust me when I say it is a fantastic movie. So this was one of the two movies that I was referring to when I said it's an Alien formula movie, but done better, like the movie Alien. This movie is Life, and it's got Ryan Reynolds in it. I think also Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal is also in it. But it is the Alien formula of people go to space, find a weird thing, bring it on their spaceship, and starts killing people. But this one is done in a much more interesting way than Alien, and I love this movie. I think, if Alien was made today, it is this. It obviously is a one and done. It's not a franchise or anything. But in my own headcanon, this ties in perfectly with Alien. It's almost the origin of Alien if you're not looking at Prometheus. So here we have another Wes Anderson, Life Aquatic. In my opinion, it's his second best. Um, you know, it's hard to talk about Wes Anderson without just being like, it's another good Wes Anderson movie. If you like Wes Anderson, watch this one. Little Shop of Horrors, which is a sci-fi horror musical. It's got Steve Martin in it. It's got some great songs. It's all about a killer plant that comes to Earth and eats people. Fantastic. Highly recommend. So good. Now, so this movie is based on a 1950 movie, I want to say. And if you look up that one, it says featuring Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson is in a 30-second scene in that movie. It is not featuring Jack Nicholson. It is also not a musical. It is purely a sci-fi horror. Don't watch the original. It's bad. This is the good one, though. The Lost Boys. What made everyone in the 80s want to be a vampire before Twilight. It's so good. It's just one of those movies that you're like, oh, this is the coolest thing. I want to do that. I want to be that guy. Because everybody in the movie is dressed so cool, talks so cool, and it's also vampires. Just, it's good. Alright, so this is another weird one. This is a concert movie / documentary from a band called Peelander Z, which is a Japanese-American rock band. They all dress like Power Rangers, basically. They each have a color, like there's Peelander yellow, Peelander pink, purple, red, green, whatever. This is kind of their documentary. I saw them live several times. I had them sign it. I love their live show. It is one of the best live concerts you can ever go to. Their music isn't great, but it is so enjoyable to watch them live because of their audience interaction. Here's another Nicolas Cage indie horror film, but this one, I think everybody pretty much universally agrees, is incredible. Crazy cult leader steals Nick Cage's wife and wants to marry her. And Nick Cage is like, nope, I'm going to kill your whole cult. And that's the movie. Very good. Go watch it. Now, this is probably my second favorite Disney animated movie. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, the original Winnie the Pooh movie. I watched it at a very young age, and I've just grown up with this movie, and the more I watch it, the more I get out of it, either from its music, its animation, its atmosphere. Like, its story is only so deep, but everything around it is so beautiful and nostalgic to me. I love Winnie the Pooh as a character, but specifically this movie. So this is Memento. It's special edition. It's supposed to look like a notebook. If you're not familiar with Memento, the whole movie is backwards. The very last scene is the first scene that you see, and it plays out that way. Everything is in reverse, and it is a mystery about a man who can only remember about 2 minutes at a time before he forgets pretty much everything. And he has all these tattoos over his body that give him the clues to try to find his wife's killer. But like I said, the whole movie plays backwards. We're discovering things as this character does, even though sometimes something will have just happened 2 minutes ago. It rewinds to where even after that happened, but we learn about it before he does often. Very good movie. Very good movie. So this is the little sister of Hereditary, Midsommar. Beautiful movie, both in story and visual and everything about this. This is A24 at its best. Highly recommend Midsummer. It's a crazy cult that's in the middle of, I think, Sweden. And stupid Americans go in and start messing stuff up, and they start killing them. It's so good. So next we're getting into some Monty Python stuff. Monty Python's now for something completely different. It is basically a best of compilation of their television show, but cut together in the style of a movie and reshot for the movie. The Life of Brian, I don't like. We're not even going to talk about that. I don't own it. But The Meaning of Life is really good. Satirization of death, basically. And then I have the box set of Monty Python, but it's big, so I'm not going to take that out. The TV show. We got Moulin Rouge. Quite frankly, I love the first 10 minutes of this movie. The whole rest of it bores me, but the first 10 minutes are fantastic, and then immediate drop off from there, for me personally. So I was introduced to Mr. Bean as a very small child, and every year we watch the Mr. Bean Christmas special. Every Thanksgiving we watch the Thanksgiving special. I love Mr. Bean. I think he is one of the funniest. Rowan Atkinson is one of the funniest, like, visual comedians of all time that I've ever seen. And this is all of the different Mr. Bean shorts into one box set. Next, My Neighbor Totoro, the third best Ghibli movie in my opinion. This is a lot of people's introduction to Studio Ghibli. It is the most famous. It is more targeted towards smaller children than slightly older children or adults. It's very visually pleasing and stuff, and doesn't have a very deep storyline, so it's very easy for small children to attach to. Like I said, it has the Fanning sisters in this movie voicing the two main girls, but it is a cultural icon even in America, let alone Japan. But this Totoro is basically the Mickey Mouse of Ghibli. I would recommend watching this one first as your first Ghibli movie if you have not watched any of them. Nightmare Before Christmas, my favorite not Tim Burton movie. This is not a Tim Burton movie. He, I think, did the creative concept or something, but he had nothing to do with this movie after, like, throwing out the concept to somebody. But still, fantastic stop animation, fantastic Christmas and Halloween movie, and musical. Just a great movie. And now we're into my favorite horror franchise from the big tentpole features of it, Nightmare on Elm Street. My personal favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie is number 3, followed by number 2, then number 1, then New Nightmare, and then the others just kind of fall in there here and there. But I love this franchise. It is just incredible. It is such a perfect balance between horror and comedy, but it never goes over the top in the comedy until like number 5, and then after number 5 they're like, oh, let's get back to more horror than comedy. So Nobody is a recent movie, but it's basically John Wick again, but cooler, but also less cool at certain things. If you like John Wick, you will love Nobody. That's really all I can say about it. No Country for Old Men suffers from Tarantino disease, where it is a fantastic movie, but probably half an hour too long. Um, Absolutely love this movie. I love its portrayal of the psychopath killer. Josh Brolin is great in everything he does, but he's exceptionally great in this one. Ocean's 11, a true classic, but unfortunately 11 is the only one that I consider a good movie. It is not even a great heist movie. I think other movies like Tower Heist and other things have done it better. This one is definitely in that era of, oh, we're so clever, we're going to outsmart everybody with this movie, and you know, but it's fun. Give it a try. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's worst movie other than Death Proof. I didn't care for it a ton. And then they shoehorned in Manson. I don't get it. I don't get this one. Pacific Rim, I love. In execution and in concept. It is giant monsters punching giant robots. There's a sequel. It's terrible. This movie is everything that I want in a movie. It's also beautiful. It's like the CGI in the movie is incredibly done. Oh, apparently I do have the sequel. This one's not good. Don't bother. Oh, I'm disappointed. So I don't have Train to Busan, but I do have the second one, Train to Busan Peninsula. Peninsula isn't very good. It's skippable, but Train to Busan, the first one, is amazing. Go watch Train to Busan. It's so good. It is my favorite zombie movie, I'll say that. Perks of Being a Wallflower isn't technically a good movie, but it has a special place in my heart. It's my favorite coming of age movie. It is definitely a movie that you have to watch when you are coming of age, otherwise it will mean nothing to you and it will be stupid. But I did watch it at that age, and it does have a special place in my heart. And so next is the Predator franchise. Predator 1 is obviously a groundbreaking movie, but I prefer Predator 2. I think it's just cooler, a cooler setting of New York instead of the middle of a jungle. Haven't seen The Predator, the third one in the franchise, but number 2 is my favorite in that franchise, though. So Prometheus is basically the origin story of the Alien franchise, and it's not good. Covenant, the one that comes after this in chronological order, is way better. But this one's not good. It's like as bad as Alien 4. So, unless you're just really curious where they came from, this is skippable. Pulp Fiction, my second favorite movie of all time, I think. Tarantino's best work, in my opinion. This embodies what makes Tarantino such a great director. I love this movie. It is a perfect movie, in my opinion. A lot of people, this isn't even their favorite Tarantino, let alone one of their favorite movies. But I love this movie. Puppet Master kind of sucks. The first like 2 or 3 are fun. The like different puppets in the movie is fun and creative, but don't sit down and watch all 9 movies. It's not worth it. But this one's all right. I meant the first one's all right. So Queen of the Damned is the better of the two out of the Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Damned franchise. I like this one so much more with its punk rock aesthetic. The I don't like Interview with Vampires, like 17th, 18th century aesthetic. It's not my speed. I love this. He is literally like a punk rock vampire, and I think it's so cool because I'm 12. A Quiet Place, a true modern horror classic. Very little sound or almost no speaking in the entire movie. It uses its audio cues so well to heighten the suspense and scares. Just real good scary movie. Rare Exports is a Christmas horror movie that a lot of people aren't familiar with. I think it's again Nordic or Swedish, but it's about a little boy who discovers that Santa Claus is definitely real and he's not as nice as people think he is. I'm not going to go too far into the plot of this movie. Highly recommend you just look it up on your own, because as a Christmas horror movie, this is a really solid one. Next, we got Reanimator, which is a wonderful, schlocky horror movie. Highly recommend it. Real bloody and gross and weird, but just real solid. So Red Dragon, which is the retelling of the first movie of Silence of the Lambs. So Silence of the Lambs actually isn't the first time that we see Hannibal Lecter in movies. It's from a movie called Manhunter. It doesn't even have the same actor playing Hannibal Lecter. It's very skippable. This is a remake of Manhunter and has Edward Norton. It is much better. It's real good. Repo the Genetic Opera isn't great as a musical, but it has a really cool set design and atmosphere around it. It's basically the premise is like, hey, do you need a new liver? They'll give you a liver, but if you can't pay for your liver, somebody's going to repo your liver and kill you. But it is an opera and a musical, but that is the less good side of it. Honestly, if it was just a movie, it would be better. Reservoir Dogs is the second best Quentin Tarantino movie, in my opinion. I believe this is one of his first movies. It might not be his first, but it's really where he got his style, at least. I think this movie really sets the template and groundwork for the rest of his movies that he does. Just real good Tarantino. So the absolute classic at this point, The Room, which was once noted as the worst best movie of all time. This is about a guy or Tommy Wiseau, this guy on the cover, really wanted to make a movie. He followed the Dolomite scheme of like, I'm going to write, direct, star, and personally fund this movie. And it's terrible. But unlike a lot of those movies that are so bad it's good, this guy gave it his absolute all. He tried his hardest in this movie. And it's terrible, but it's so much fun to watch. The Royal Tenenbaums. This is the best Wes Anderson movie. This is the one that I recommend everyone start with. If you are unfamiliar with Wes Anderson, start with this one. It is the most entertaining, cohesive, and exciting of his movies to watch. And it really showcases his style that is permeated through all of his movies, but just this one is the shining example of that. Then we got Rubber. which is a sentient psychopathic tire who goes around killing people. But then there are people watching the tire do that, and they are a surrogate for the audience watching the movie, but they're in the movie and they are directly involved in the movie, but they're watching the movie. It's one of those like commentaries on filmmaking, but with the absurd context of a killer psycho tire. Santa's Sleigh, with Bill Goldberg playing Santa Claus, who's a professional wrestler. Again, a real fun Christmas horror movie. It's got Fran Drescher in it, the nanny, but it's, you know, Santa Claus is tired of being a nice guy. He's going to kill you, and it's cheesy, and honestly, it kind of slows down about the second or third act, but it's still really fun to watch. Next is the gangster classic Scarface, arguably just as, if not more famous than Goodfellas. Scarface is the, you know, epitome of Al Pacino's acting career. Maybe Scent of a Woman is on par with it, but you know, you don't get any more just like rough and tough gangster. It is the opposite side of gangster movies as Goodfellas. Goodfellas is pretty well like everybody's, you know, very well reserved, and, you know, they let somebody else do the dirty work. He's the guy that does the dirty work. So next we got a little 4-pack of sci-fi movies, but the one that I really want to talk here is The Giant Claw. So The Giant Claw is, in my opinion, the worst, best classic sci-fi movie. It's a giant vulture, I guess, who, you know, goes around terrorizing people, but it's this rinky-dink little puppet that you can see the strings. It looks terrible. It's terribly done, but it's so much fun to watch. Like I said, the worst, best sci-fi movie from the 50s. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Edgar Wright's best, in my opinion. Another director whose style just permeates through the whole movie. This is really good comic book series as well, but equally translate very well in the movie. Seven is a horror mystery drama movie based on the Seven Deadly Sins. Very good, very gross, very impactful. You definitely feel the weight of the kills and what the characters are going through emotionally. Now we finally get to them, the Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal. Silence of the Lambs, like I said, is the first Anthony Hopkins appearance as Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal being the second appearance, with Red Dragon being the third. They're both very solid movies. Silence of the Lambs is, of course, almost a perfect movie, if not a perfect movie. Hannibal has its flaws, but the antagonist to Hannibal Lecter in the movie is incredibly well done by Gary Oldman. Now, my favorite actor of all time is Matthew Lillard from Scooby-Doo, from Saw, or not Saw, Scream, any number of things. This is one of his more obscure titles, but it is to Matthew Lillard as a punk in Salt Lake City, SLC, Salt Lake City. And it's just a team, you know, movie. He's, you know, oh, my parents don't understand me, blah, 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 blah. it's that. It's not groundbreaking at all, but it's still a really good movie with Matthew Lillard, whom I love. So if you like Cowboy Bebop, you would also like Space Dandy, which is another one of those absurdist television shows. Almost in the same feel as like One Piece or Bo, but more directly related to Cowboy Bebop in its atmosphere. But just an absurdist sci-fi anime. So here's an oddity. This is the 1970s Japanese Spider-Man television show. It's actually the first live-action Marvel thing that was ever made. This is officially licensed by Marvel. They knew that they were making this. They gave him permission to make this character. But it's Spider-Man as a Power Ranger. He, has a Megazord and everything. He has a car that he drives around in. He fights giant monsters. It is Power Rangers, but with Spider-Man instead of Power Rangers. It's absurd, it's not good, but it's very fun to watch. And then we have just the best Spider-Man movie to date. Yeah, with a little asterisk by it. We'll see if that holds up. But Into the Spider-Verse, absolutely incredible movie. Again, featuring our Nicolas Cage, whom we keep seeing pop up. But I love this one. This one was so well done in art style and everything. And here's my favorite Ghibli movie, Spirited Away. Highly recommend this one. This one has a lot more like Japanese culture influence in it, so Americaners might not understand fully the meaning of the creatures in this movie. But a quick little Google search will fix that. But like I said, this is my favorite of the Ghibli movies. So Stitches is an Irish killer clown horror movie. Almost a horror comedy, though. It is unabashedly Irish, though. Very fun to just hear a bunch of Irish teens curse at each other, with the background being a killer clown coming after them. Stranger Than Fiction is an often overlooked Will Ferrell movie. One of his more serious roles, there's some comedy elements and stuff in it as well, but just really solid drama Will Ferrell. So next is the Suicide Squad movies. The first one with absolutely terrible movie, but fantastic soundtrack, and that's the only credit I give it. And then the new one, which I think is a fantastic movie. It is my favorite live-action DC movie. Not that that's a hard competition, but I think that this is a shining new direction for DC to start going in. I loved the new Suicide Squad movie. Now, this is my favorite DC animated. DC has a lot of a really expansive animated library. Another one would be Justice League Doom. I think that is a really good one as well, but this is my favorite. Superman versus the Elite, which is Superman versus Manchester Black and his team called the Elite. But just a fantastic animated superhero movie. Highly recommend you check that one out. Super Troopers, classic comedy. It's like Cops on television, but just dumb and absurd. Then we got Swiss Army Man, which is really Daniel Radcliffe's first role that broke him away from being the Harry Potter guy. And also it's got Paul Dano in, whom I love. Um, you need to go into this movie not really knowing much and just kind of watch it. Know that it's weird. It's real weird. Daniel Radcliffe is weird and gross in this movie. Not squeamishly gross, but like a lot of fart jokes and stuff. But just give it a check out. It's such a strange, independent movie, but it's such a breath of fresh air from Daniel Radcliffe after Harry Potter. Then we got this little collection of movies. The main reason I have it is because of its featuring of Reefer Madness. This is all just like, this is a collection of movies that is supposed to, from the 50s and 60s, drive teenagers away from doing bad habits, either premarital sex, cocaine, marijuana, whatever it is. But they're all done terribly, and they end up like in Reefer Madness. If you smoke the weed, you turn into like a zombie, and it's like an actual like zombie, not just like a brainless idiot. This is just a collection of some of those that are just real horrible and weird. But I used to watch these with some of my friends. Not worth checking out. All right, Taxi Driver. I don't love this movie. I think it's incredibly overhyped. Robert De Niro is fantastic in it. That is the only thing good about this movie, though. I think this movie is way overanalyzed, overtalked about, and overhyped. The only thing I'll add to that conversation is I think that Robert De Niro's character is autistic in this movie, and that's just not talked about or discussed, because it's obviously like the 60s era, or 70s era, excuse me. But like, why else would he take a woman to an adult movie just like on a date? I think that there's like a, disconnect with that. But yeah, I just don't love this movie. Terrifier, another spooky clown movie. This one is all show, no sustenance. It's just, oh, watch this clown do something weird. There's the one part of the movie where he bisects the woman, and that's like the most horrific part of the entire movie. But for the most part, this movie is just like, oh, this is weird clown doing weird thing. There's no sustenance to it. It is just, one weird thing after another. Next is Terror Vision. I've not seen this one on the side, but Terror Vision is a fantastic 70s, 80s sci-fi movie. Real weird alien concept. Another one that's kind of hard to explain, but see if you can find it somewhere, give it a shot. Real cool movie. So next is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2. I think 2 is so much more fun. Sorry, I got a text. 2 is just such a really fun, interesting movie. I really enjoy that one. It kind of leans almost into the more Rob Zombie angle of it being weird and campy. There's a chainsaw sword fight, but the first one's a classic for a reason. Obviously, a very good movie. The Theory of Everything is the life and story of Stephen Hawking, done by Eddie Redmayne. I think this is a really beautiful movie. Made me cry. Whether you like Stephen Hawking or not, he had a very challenged life, and this movie really makes you feel it and just appreciate him as a person. Maybe not the things that he has done or said, but it makes you just appreciate his hardships. But just beautiful movie. Next is John Carpenter's The Thing. My favorite John Carpenter movie, my favorite Kurt Russell movie. It's a, you know, the Red Scare at its peak, personified in a movie. It is, who can we trust? Who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy? Classic sci-fi horror, though. Another one of my absolute favorite horror movies of all time is 13 Ghosts with Matthew Lillard and the guy from Monk, whatever his name is. This movie is not great, but what it does well, it exceedingly does well. But some of the stuff is not amazing. But as a horror movie stands, and especially like an early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s horror movie, it's really good. So next we have This Is the End, which is the best like stoner comedy movie in my opinion. Maybe seconded by Superbad, but this one, it's just fun. It's an end of the world movie. All the famous actors on the front are playing themselves surviving the apocalypse. We got Tokyo Ghoul, my favorite anime. Most of the anime I like is absurdist humor stuff, but this one is definitely like horror and, just really beautiful animation though. I absolutely love the story. But like I said, this is my favorite anime. So next is Trainspotting, which is kind of a hard movie to watch. It's all about heroin addiction. It's not fun or, haha, having a good time, but it's a very good, important, strong movie. I would put it in the same circle as like Requiem for a Dream. This one's a little bit lighter than Requiem, but Ewan McGregor from Star Wars is in this movie. Just super solid movie though. Next is Trick or Treat with Ozzy Osbourne and Gene Simmons. It's not good. Don't watch this. But it's got Gene Simmons and Ozzy Osbourne for like a cumulative 5 minutes in it. But Trick or Treat is amazing. This is my favorite Halloween time movie. This is just the peak Halloween holiday movie in my opinion. It has so many good things. It's basically an anthology, but all the stories tie together at the end. If you haven't seen this, give it a check out. That's all I can say. So next we have Tron and Tron Legacy. Tron is not good. It's really innovative for its time. It's a really cool, stylized movie, but it's not great. It's kind of cool how they predicted the internet before it was a thing. That's about all. Tron Legacy is really pretty. I like Tron Legacy a lot. That's all I gotta say about those two. They are perfect capsules for the time period they were both made, but honestly, beyond visually, neither of them have terribly much going on for them. Next is Weird Al Yankovic's UHF, which is part clip show of, his comedy random parody bits and part comedy early 80s story. It's unless you like Weird Al, this is not a movie worth watching in and of itself, but it is it's still fun. Next, we got the first series of Ultraman. I love Ultraman. He is kind of like Godzilla, but not. He, you know, man turns into a giant robot, fights giant monsters, turns back into a man. Nobody knows who he is. He's the precursor to Power Rangers, because Power Rangers is based on something called Super Sentai, which spawned from Ultraman. So Ultraman is the one that kind of created that initial concept. And this is the last movie in the like Alien franchise that I was talking about that pairs with life. It's called Underwater with Kristen Stewart. Instead of going to space, they go underwater, but it's the same exact concept. They find something strange, everything starts to go wrong, one last survivor can tell the whole world, you know. But just real good movie. I prefer Life to this one, but this was still a really strong contender. The Usual Suspects. Kind of a gangster movie, but also kind of a mystery. I'm not going to spoil anything. If you haven't seen this, check it out. There's, it's a whodunit type mystery, but just very well done. Here's the movie I compared with Star Wars earlier, Valerian. Valerian is another one of those high concept sci-fi fantasy, but it's so good. I think this one's based on a French comic or something, but honestly, this and Fifth Element can replace Star Wars any day in my book. Just this one has obviously the more updated new graphics and stuff, but Fifth Element does not suffer from the lack of. This one just has better graphics. But just if you like Star Wars, please watch Valerian or Fifth Element. Vampire's Kiss. Vampire's Kiss is a so bad it's good Nick Cage movie. He runs around New York telling people he's a vampire, trying to bite people, but it's Nick Cage at his wackiest, like as an actor, not the character he's playing, but the way he portrays this character is bug nuts. If you've seen Nick Cage best moments on YouTube, you've seen a lot of moments from this movie because this is him at his nuttiest. Highly recommend if you are a Nick Cage fan. Next, we got VHS 1 and 2, another horror anthology series. ABC of Death is probably better than this one. This one has some cool vignettes in it, but it's just another horror anthology, and not even that good of one. Next is Village of the Damned, another John Carpenter. This time it's got, Superman in it. This movie is really interesting. It's not great, but it's very similar to Children of the Corn, I guess. But this is actually a remake of a 1940s movie, I think. But I prefer this one actually to the original, but I don't know. It's good, worth checking out maybe. Next is Pink Floyd's The Wall. In the same style as the Beatles doing movies, Pink Floyd did this one. This one has a lot of animated vignettes in it, along with live action, but it takes the album The Wall and breaks it down into a rock opera type thing. Very politically driven, very it has a message, let's put it that way. classism and stuff. Watchmen, one of my favorite comic book adaptation movies. I really enjoyed this movie. I know a lot of people kind of give it a bunch of crap because Watchmen is such a seminal book, and this one changes a few things which people, do or don't like. But I personally just really like this movie. I think it adapts it really well. You only got to change a few things, but Snyder is one of my favorite comic book adaptators for movies. What We Do in the Shadows, both the movie and the TV show. I don't own the TV show, but same basic premise. It is documentary style, similar to The Office, but following around vampires. See what they do day to day, their wacky shenanigans. Just really good movie, really good series. We're at the top of the top right now. This is my favorite movie of all time, Whiplash, with J.K. Simmons, and then a little guy that was from that terrible Fantastic Four remake. I love this movie. It is so intense. It makes you feel so many things. It is partially a musical. There's a lot of instrumentation in the movie that is part of the movie. It's not just, it's about a guy trying to be a drummer in a college band, and J.K. Simmons is the band director, but J.K. Simmons is at his most intense in this movie. I love this movie so much. It's not for everybody. It's honestly really intense, the dynamic between J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller, but I love this movie. And now on to something a little wackier. Why Him? It's just a rom-com. It's probably one of my favorite rom-coms. It's got James Franco versus Bryan Cranston. It's just a why are you dating my daughter? And I love your daughter, but I'm also a crazy guy, and so I'm also a crazy guy, and it's a fun, stupid movie. That's all that needs to be said about it. Next, Willy's Wonderland, our last Nicolas Cage showing of the night. But again, based on the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, I think that this movie does a better job than the Banana Splits of depicting that fear. But this is a weird one. Nicolas Cage doesn't say a single word in the entire movie. And he is portrayed as this just ultra cool guy who can, take out these animatronics with no issue. Which kind of deflates the weight of their intensity or scariness. But honestly, it's just fun because of Nick Cage. If Nick Cage was not in this movie would be nothing. But Nick Cage really elevates this movie to something more enjoyable. Wolf of Wall Street is next. Leo DiCaprio at his best, in my opinion. Another one of those just movies that college kids just really seem to like. Watching it not in college, I've kind of been like, it's a bit long, it's fun, but similar to a Goodfellas type thing, but more Wall Street based. Almost there. Second to last is Yellow Submarine, the Beatles movie. This one is entirely animated. It definitely delves into more of the psychedelic side of the Beatles. Very, very loose story that drives the plot, but still just a real fun movie to watch. And then last for the Blu-rays and DVDs is Zombieland. Zombieland is a great zombie comedy movie. Most everybody's seen Zombieland if you're into horror movies at all. This one's more comedy than it is horror. But you'll know what that one is. I just want to show off my steelbook. But that's pretty much it for my DVD and Blu-ray collection. We're probably going to break this down into a two-part video because this has a runtime of like 2.5 hours or something absurd like that. The next part of the video, I'll show you my books, VHS tapes, and vinyl record collection, and maybe a couple of the other things in the room. But the Blu-rays and DVDs is the most significant chunk of my collection, and want to go ahead and just get that out there, and then we'll work on the part 2 in the meantime. But I hope that y'all have enjoyed it. I hope this proves that I do have knowledge of film and a love of film. You know, if there's any movies that for whatever reason you specifically want to know my opinion on that I didn't fully cover or get into super nitty-gritty details about, let me know in the comments. I'll maybe make a video or maybe just respond to your comment. But regardless, y'all have a wonderful day.